Okay, well, welcome everyone to the Forum at Friendship, the December edition. The Forum at Friendship is a monthly adult education program of Friendship Presbyterian Church in Athens, Georgia. My name is Tom Buchanan, and I am the pastor of Friendship Church. And Maurice and I are very glad that you're with us tonight. Tonight, our topic is astronomical thoughts on the Star of Bethlehem and is being led by Dr. Maurice Snook. Now, for centuries, astronomers and laymen alike have wondered about the Star of Bethlehem. Was it a nova, a comet, a planetary conjunction, or an inexplicable miracle? Dr. Snook will use scripture, paintings, personal photographs, postage stamps, and astronomical calculations to investigate possible celestial phenomena that scholars and astronomers posit may explain this event. Now, Dr. Maurice Snook, who is a good friend of mine and someone I'm very excited about speaking tonight, earned his Bachelor of Science degree in chemistry from Drexel University in Philadelphia back in 1967, and a PhD in organic chemistry from Penn State in 1971. He was employed by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Agricultural Research Service, Russell Research Center here in Athens from 1973 until his retirement in 2010. Maurice has been an avid amateur astronomer for over 65 years. In that time, he has founded 2 astronomy clubs and served as president of 3 clubs, taught astronomy in Clark County Talented and Gifted program, organized numerous astronomy exhibits, talks, and observing sessions at area schools, festivals, and state parks, lectured on solar eclipse safety at local schools and libraries, authored a weekly Halley's Comet column for the Athens Banner Herald, and has assisted Sandy Creek Nature Center and Park in coordinating star watches every year since 1980. He also taught an astronomy course for the University of Georgia's continuing education program for over 5 years, and more recently in the OLLI program. He and his wife, Karen, have personally observed 6 total solar eclipses and 2 annular eclipses. His solar eclipse photo appeared in the World Book Encyclopedia, 1974 to 2009, and others have been included in other textbooks and periodicals. Now, best of all, for us at Friendship Church, Maurice has been a member of Friendship Church since 1978 and has served as the head usher for over 30 years. And so with that, Maurice, I'll hand this over to you. We're really looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you. And if we could have the first slide.
All right. Do a share screen. One second. Here we go. Okay.
Okay. Each year at this time, interest runs high about a celestial event full of meaning and symbolism. This was the recorded appearance over 2,000 years ago of an unusual star to guide the wise men on their journey to honor the newborn Christ child. Many prefer to think that the star was purely miraculous and not any ordinary phenomenon in the night sky. In the past, if you visited any planetarium in December, you were bound to view a show that explored what celestial event might explain the Star of Bethlehem. This year is especially significant because of an event that will occur in 3 weeks on December 21st. As you will see from this talk, it will be very significant to this subject. I would like to take you on a journey to determine if the star was an explainable celestial phenomenon. We can have the next slide, please.
Okay.
Literary and artistic representations of the Star of Bethlehem abound. As you will see throughout this talk, many have appeared on postage stamps from around the world. Ultimately, however, they all depend on a single passage in the New Testament So, and in Matthew chapter 2, verse 1, we read, next slide, please. Now, when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, where is he who is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him. We can have the next slide, please. When they had heard the king, they went their way, and lo, the star which they had seen in the east went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceedingly great joy. Next slide. Notice that the Bible makes no mention of how many wise men or magi there were, nor can we be sure whether their homeland was in the east or whether the star appeared in the eastern sky, and translations differ on so crucial a matter. It has also been assumed that the wise men were probably Chaldean priests, astrologers from the Babylonian area. In order to determine a possible astronomical explanation of the star of Bethlehem, we first have to determine when was Jesus born. And this is not an easy thing to do. Next slide, please. The following passage narrows the birth date to Caesar Augustus's reign, which was from 30 BC to 14 AD. In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be enrolled. And Joseph also went up from Galilee, from the city of Nazareth to Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem. This is from Luke chapter 2, verse 1. Next slide, please. The historian Josephus wrote that Herod died after a lunar eclipse. It has been assumed that Herod died in March of 4 BC because of the eclipse that year shown here on the left. And it would seem then that Christ would have to have been born, of course, before that time, and it could be perhaps as early as 12 BC. Also, we must remember that there is no year zero. When they decided to count the years from when they thought Christ was born, they started with the first year as 1. However, the March 4th BC partial eclipse was barely visible in Jerusalem, beginning around 1:30 a.m. and ending about 3:30 a.m. And the small picture there in the lower left is one I took of an eclipse of approximately the same magnitude. However, the one on the right of January 1st, January 9th, 10th, 1 BC, is a possible contender for the eclipse for Herod because it began at 11:38 p.m. and was total. I'll have more to say about this later date in a little bit. Next slide, please. Although Luke describes Christ's birth, it mentions neither the star nor Herod. Modern studies of textual clues indicate that this account, taken by itself, points to as late as AD 6 or 7 as the date of Christ's birth. It certainly was not December 25th, which was fixed arbitrarily in the 4th century. The passage in Luke, and in that region there were shepherds out in the field keeping watch over their flocks by night, from Luke, has been interpreted as meaning Christ was born in the spring because the shepherds were out at night, and this is done only during the spring lambing season. Excuse me. With all this in mind, what, if anything, can we say about possible astronomical phenomenon that may explain or account for the star? Next slide, please. I think we can immediately discount aurora and meteors as these are too short-lived a phenomenon. Also, aurora were normally never seen as far south as the Mediterranean. And I think we can also rule out eclipses because their predictions were known from early times. A famous one was predicted in 525 BC it stopped the war between the Lydians and the Medes. They were so frightened about it. But a Greek astronomer predicted it. We can have the next slide. The first thing that comes to an astronomer's mind is that the star could have been a nova or new star. Some novas are so bright that they are called supernovas and can become as bright as an entire galaxy and be visible in the daytime for months. Depicted on this stamp on the right is the supernova of 1573 that was observed by the great Danish astronomer Tycho Brahe. There have been many regular novas recorded in history. I actually saw one that was as bright as the stars of the Big Dipper from here in Athens in 1974. It was in the constellation of Cygnus. Regular nova were recorded in Chinese records in 12 BC and 5 BC. The Chinese were very good at noting celestial phenomenon. 2 Chinese court astrologers were put to death when they got drunk and neglected to inform their emperor of an occurrence of a solar eclipse. After 1573, there was a supernova seen in 1604, but there were no supernovas recorded during the time period we are interested in. Because Herod did not see the star, scholars do not think a nova is a good candidate for the star. Next slide, please. Well, how about a comet? They are not transient, and a bright comet with its long tail pointing away is a possibility. A comet could have been visible for the entire length of the Magi's travels, and an object in space would appear to go before them. Here is Halley's Comet, and is depicted on the Bayeux type tapestry of the Norman conquest of England. It appeared in 1066 and was considered a good omen by William the Conqueror, but a bad omen shown here being reported to Harold, King of England. Halley's Comet did appear in 12 BC. A medieval woodcut shows Halley's Comet over Jerusalem on the right. Next slide, please. Here is famous comet Hale-Bopp over Friendship Presbyterian Church. This was taken in 1996 with the help of Chester Lee. And we use that on Christmas cards the next year, I believe, for people there at the church. Next slide, please. The Florentine painter Giotto was so impressed by Halley's appearance in 1294 that he included the comet as the star in his famous painting of the Adoration of the Magi, shown here. Next slide, please. When Italy and the European Space Agency sent a spacecraft to visit Halley's Comet as it came around the sun in 1986, they named the spacecraft Giotto in reference to the painting. During Halley's 1986 appearance, there were an estimated 700 people gathered at Friendship Church for a viewing of the comet as it receded from the sun. If you missed it, don't worry, it'll be back in about 42 years. Next slide, please.
There we go.
However, from ancient times, comets have been associated with evil happenings. Homer associated comets with diseases, pestilence, and war, and the ancient Persians called them wicked fairies. And thus it is not likely that a comet is the sign we are looking for. And again, Herod did not see the star. You have to remember that. Next slide, please. Let us turn our attention to discuss just who the wise men or magi might have been and who were the only ones to have seen the star. Marco Polo reported passing through a small Persian village called Save, whose people told him that it was the town from which the Magi set forth. Other Near East towns have similar legends. It was in this part of the world that astronomy developed in the last few centuries BC. Cuneiform tablets from Mesopotamia contain sophisticated planetary tables that must have originated from careful observation of celestial phenomena. Next slide, please. Many constellations, including those of the zodiac, were formed by the civilizations of the Fertile Crescent, some as early as the 3rd millennium BC. This stamp from Israel is interesting because the Bible has many references to disregard predictions based on the stars and planets, so the Hebrews did not develop any astronomical and astrological traditions. Some of those constellations you see there are Taurus and Gemini, and the Leo, the Lion, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Pisces, and Hydra. Next slide, please. Most scholars have agreed that the Magi were probably Chaldean priest astrologers from the Sumer Babylon area who made celestial observations in order to foretell earthly events for their kings. They probably observed from atop their famous ziggurats. A reconstruction of the one at Babylon is shown here. If the Magi sighted a star, why would they conclude that it marked the birth of a new king of the Jews? One has only to remember that Nebuchadnezzar conquered Jerusalem and brought the Jews to Babylon about 500 years before the time we are investigating. Babylonian astrologers would undoubtedly be interested in celestial events that related to Israel. They would be familiar with the Old Testament, and there are several prophecies in the Old Testament that suggest how such a sign might be interpreted as pertaining to Israel. The next slide, please. From very early times, the lion and scepter have been traditional symbols of the Jews. In Numbers, Balaam foretells that in the distant future, some descendant of Jacob will rise up as a Messiah. And it is written, I shall see him, but not now. I shall behold him, but not nigh. There shall come a star out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel. Also in Genesis, Jacob is addressing his son Judah, and quote says, Judah is a lion's whelp. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh come, and unto him shall the gathering of the people be. Next slide, please. These passages reminded the German scholar Alfred Jeremias of the constellation of Leo the Lion, in which the bright star Regulus, meaning king, lies near the animal's front paws. Astronomical events occurring in Leo would be associated with Israel. Next slide, please. In ancient times, the planets were considered gods, and indeed all are named after them. They moved through the zodiac and frequently passed one another. These movements were considered very important in astrological predictions. This was especially true of rare or close passings called conjunctions. They also can be very striking visually. Next slide. Here I recorded the passing of Jupiter and Venus in 1964. Unfortunately, due to cloudiness, I did not get a picture when the two planets were closest, which would have been very spectacular. A much closer passage of Jupiter and Saturn will occur this December 21st, and I will have more to say about that later. Next slide. There are several types of planetary conjunctions. Number one, two-planet conjunctions, most common. The more rare, multiple planet groupings, and the most rare, triple conjunctions, which does not mean three planets. The usual motion of an outer planet among the stars is eastward. On this diagram, to show you what it would really be like, you'd have to rotate it 90 degrees counterclockwise. And you'll see at point 1, a planet going to the left, as you would say, face south, would be moving eastward. Now, our motion around the sun moves the star sphere, including the planets, though daily westward. Faster moving inner planets like the Earth, shown in the diagram, catch up to the outer ones, and they make the eastward movement of the outer planet appear to stop and then retrace their steps backwards or westward, called retrograde motion, which would be point 3. This is analogous to you passing a slower moving car on the expressway. The slower moving car appears to move backward in relation to objects further away. As Earth moves on past the outer planet then removes its normal eastward movement, point number 5 on the diagram. On the next slide, we will show you the very rare triple conjunction of 2 planets. This occurs when 2 outer planets' retrograde loops overlap. Johannes Kepler witnessed a rare triple conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn in 1603. Using his newly developed theory of planetary movements, he was able to calculate that the same thing happened in 7 BC. Here, the 1603 one is depicted. You can see how Jupiter, and I need to make this a little smaller. My screen went a little bigger than I want it to be. Oh, there we go. All right. Let me get to that. Okay. Whoops, that didn't work.
Make it wider.
All right, now we got it. You can see that Jupiter would be moving to the east from the right-hand side of the diagram. And Saturn also would be moving from the right-hand side towards its first point, conjunction number 1. Then as the Earth passes both of those planets, both of them cycle backward. And Jupiter then would pass Saturn again at conjunction number 2. As Earth continues on past these planets, Jupiter and both Saturn will swing around and you will have conjunction number 3. So number 1 would occur May 29th, conjunction number 2, September 30th, conjunction number 3, December 5th. Each of these 3 passings could be related to the wise men's journey from starting out, conjunction 1, meeting with Herod, conjunction number 2, and finally standing at the manger, conjunction number 3. Let's have the next slide. These triple conjunctions actually occurred in the constellation Pisces. And Pisces, the fishes, is frequently associated with Israel and the Jews. Not only that, Mars was also near them. And this 7 BC event is the most favored by astronomers and scholars, and is the event presented in many planetarium shows this time of year. Next slide, please. In 1968, with the advent of personal computers, Roger Sennett of Sky and Telescope magazine calculated planetary conjunctions from 12 BC to 4 AD. And this stamp from Canada, issued for Christmas, seems to represent, to an astronomer anyway, a conjunction of planets, 2 bright stars up there. There were over 200 conjunctions of planets during the time period 12 BC to 4 AD. But he investigated those that were exceptionally close and only visible from Babylon. Next slide, please, shows the results of these calculations. The triple conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn, which we've already discussed, is listed there, the first one, as well as several others of remarkable interest. I have mentioned the importance of the zodiac constellations Leo the Lion and Pisces the Fishes being associated with the Jews. Therefore, any planetary conjunction occurring in those constellations would have been interpreted to signify something important concerning them. We can probably rule out conjunctions with Mars as not important because Mars is the god of war, and so I think we can rule those out. The 7 BC conjunction, while a rare triple conjunction, which sometimes can only happen once every 200 or more years, was not in a particularly close grouping. The separation of the planets there was 1 degree, which is about the width of 2 full moons. However, the 2 conjunctions listed above and below the yellow line, if it looks yellow on your screen, might be greenish, are quite of a different character. The planets passing each other exceptionally close. The 3 BC event took place in the eastern morning sky, while the 2 BC event occurred in the western evening sky. The 2 BC conjunction has been argued as being so spectacular as to be considered an important rival for the 7 BC event as the star. Why is this so? It's because the 2 planets passed so close to one another that they appeared to merge or fuse into one. And you can experience the same thing this December 21st. Next slide. Also important is the fact that both conjunctions took place in Leo, which we mentioned before as having a particularly strong association with the Jews. Not only that, but Regulus was squarely between the 2 points, Regulus the king. Could the 3 BC event have started the Magi on their journey? And the 2 BC event occurred in the western sky, leading them to go to Jerusalem and thinking it's in the direction of Israel. We can only wonder. Next slide. Interesting, a book of Jewish symbols of the Greco-Roman period, published in 1953, shows this amulet or religious charm stone. It dates from the first few centuries AD. No definite association with the Nativity can be claimed, yet the star symbol, placed just where the Jupiter-Venus 2 BC event occurred in Leo, is certainly rather startling. Next slide. All right, let's go back to June 17th, 2 BC. You are a Chaldean priest hurrying to finish your late afternoon duties so that you can be free to concentrate on something you have been waiting to see for months. In previous weeks, you have been watching as Jupiter, the king of celestial gods, inches towards Venus or Ishtar. Tonight, you just know something extraordinary is going to happen. You race up the steps of the ziggurat, tripping over your robes and bruising your knee. In excitement, you hardly notice the pain. You lay one leg of your wooden divider on the flat block of stone at the top of the ziggurat and sight along the other leg and spot Venus, even as the sun is just setting. It is 7:04 local Babylonian time. You check your watch. A little while later, Jupiter becomes visible just above Venus. You were right in your calculations. The 2 are much closer tonight. Next slide. It is now 7:34 and the end of twilight. The moon is rising in the east and the bright stars are beginning to appear. As the sky darkens, this brilliant double star sinks lower, the planets drawing nearer and nearer. I hope I got you all on pins and needles. Next slide. At 8:30, with the pair 15 degrees above the horizon, the 2 miraculously merge, inseparable with the naked eye, something never before seen by civilized man. Next slide. Finally, at 10:02, the merged planets, flashing and radiating, scintillating colors of the rainbow, gleam like a great beacon over Judea to the west. Astronomy can tell us this event happened, but whether anyone actually observed it and if it sent the Magi on their historic journey are matters for conjecture. It certainly has all the qualities of an event that would signal so momentous an occasion as the birth of Christ. Last slide, please. This is a picture I took a couple of weeks ago showing Jupiter and Saturn in the southwestern sky with the crescent moon down in the lower right. Just as such an event as I have just been describing in 7 BC and 1 BC will happen Monday, December 21st at the winter solstice. For the first time since 1623, Jupiter will pass so close to Saturn that the two will be inseparable to the naked eye. Not quite as spectacular as Jupiter and brilliant Venus, but still it will be a more remarkable sight. You should be able to spot them shortly after 5:45 p.m., 2 or 3 hands above the western horizon. So you will need to be able to look low on the horizon. You should use binoculars to see them barely separated. It has not happened in 400 years and will not again for over 200. While you're looking, spot the first quarter moon in the south, about 45 degrees up, and bright orangish Mars to its east. 2 days from the 21st, the moon will be much closer to Mars. And a few days before the 21st, the moon will be near Jupiter and Saturn. Actually, all 6 outer planets, including Pluto, that's a planet for me, are in the evening sky right now, although you need a telescope to see several of them. I hope I've been able to describe some of the celestial events that scholars have proposed to explain the Star of Bethlehem. Whatever the possible physical event that Matthew described, without the star, the story of Jesus' birth would not be as inspiring. Further, the life of us historical astronomers would be so much the poorer without it. It is not so important as to what it actually was, but rather what it signifies and leads us toward in our beliefs in that momentous event that occurred over 2,000 years ago. Thank you all. Hope you enjoy it.
All right. Thanks, Maurice. All right. Let's open it up to some questions. I'm sure there've got to be some anyway. That was an outstanding presentation, exceptionally interesting. Okay, and let me just say, if you do have a question or if you have a comment or anything, if you could stay muted, but use your computer like a walkie-talkie by holding down the space bar and speaking, and then when you're done speaking, you can release the space bar, and then you'll be mute again. Okay? You got that? It's like, it's like you have a walkie-talkie and you press the button when you want to talk and then you release it. On your computer, you can use the space bar that way.
I know I snowed you all. Too much calculations and technicalities.
Snook, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this is Richard.
Yes.
So what you presented tonight specific to the Middle East, or were they specific to Athens? What location were you talking about specifically?
They were, the conjunctions that they were talking about, they calculated were visible from just the Middle East, especially the one where they merged. That only happened in the Middle East. If you were, say, in Asia or in the Americas, they wouldn't, they only merged for a short period of time, several hours. And so if you, back in that days, you were in America and looked at it, they would, Jupiter would have already passed Venus and be below it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what's so important and why it's so, they think it's it only occurred there in the Babylon area, in that strip of area of land.
Mm-hmm.
Now the 7 BC one could be seen, of course, all over the world because it lasted quite a longer time.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Oh, go ahead.
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
Very good. Enjoyed it very much. Tom Landrum from
Yes,
First
Tom.
Presbyterian Church. You referenced one of the conjunctions as being so significant that it radiated light up, or at least around the conjunction. Can you be more specific about that? I mean, was that a visual reality in terms of light being radiated up and out?
Actually, no, that was my artistic enhancement there of that. But actually, when Venus and Jupiter gets very low in the horizon, the refraction of light causes it to twinkle and go through all kinds of colors. Sirius, the brightest star in the sky, is known to do that very much, more so than Venus, because Sirius is being a star far, far away, is always a point of light. But when it's rising in the east, which it does in a few hours, the refraction of light makes it the color of the rainbow sparkle and change colors. Venus, being more of a planet, and with the telescope, of course, showing a disk, won't sparkle as much as Sirius does, but it can sparkle more and twinkle. Most planets do not twinkle. Mars and Venus and Jupiter don't twinkle. Stars do. But when Venus gets down in the lower atmosphere, it will look like it's twinkling. So yeah, there was a little artistic liberty with that one diagram.
Excuse me, how long in distance between where you would have noticed the conjunction is it to Bethlehem in terms of kilometers or miles?
Oh, I don't know how far it is from, say, Babylon to Bethlehem. 500 maybe, or
It'd be more than that, but less than 1,000. It would be
about 700 miles.
700 or so, yeah.
Yeah, so it would take them several months by camel, or at least several, they may not have started off right away, so.
Mm-hmm.
Maurice, is there a best place to view the December 21st event?
Wherever you can, if you keep an eye on Jupiter and Saturn each week, and you'll see they're getting lower and lower, and you'll be able to judge whether or not there's any trees, in your way, because they're only going to be about 2 hands high from the horizon when you stretch your hands out. So if you can't see 2 hands high from the horizon because your trees are there, you'll have to, I know if you go out to where I live out here in Plantation Estates, old Lexington, I can go out Morton Road, and there's a lot of fields out there that have a long horizon. You just have to go some places to find. We're hoping to host a star watch at Sandy Creek Park that night. But because of the virus, they're only limiting it to about 20 people. Mm-hmm. But it's, so just check them out. Jupiter's the brightest star in the sky right now in the southwest. And you'll see, like I showed you in that picture at the last slide, just keep an eye on them. As the weeks go by, watching them getting closer and closer and closer, and you'll see if you can follow them all the way down to the 21st.
Maurice, there was one thing I wanted to bring in, and that is that one of the fixed historical dates that we really know of. I mean, of course we know the reign of Augustus Caesar. One of the other sure historical dates is the death of Herod the Great. We know that he died in 4 BC. And I think that's probably what would encourage people, astronomers who are interested in this, to really want to zero in on that 7 BC date.
They have, but astronomers, and I just read in the newest Sky and Telescope that they are starting to look more at the 1 BC event, and that Herod could have died after in 1 BC. I haven't looked online, because if you go online and start looking, people have their own pet theories. And it is hard to separate the real scholarly. They'll say, oh yeah, Herod died in 4 BC. And others say, no, 1 BC. I haven't really looked close at the newest data on that as to the thing. Josephus is the one that said Herod died, after a total eclipse. Or not a total, but a lunar eclipse.
Okay.
And they're starting to think both that 1 BC date is starting to be, considered more now than, although I think the majority do go with 4 BC.
That's been the conventional sort of standard date that scholars have worked with.
And they use that eclipse.
Oh, okay.
They use that eclipse to set that date.
Okay.
He thought that, Judy here, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Is there any thought that some of the reports of the star could have been retrospective? My biblical knowledge is fairly thin, so bear with me here, but I think there was a lot of speculation about a Messiah coming, right? But then quite little said about Jesus's life until he was, 30, and began his preaching. So I would wonder, would there have been, maybe as reports became more and more, this man is preaching and we think he's the Messiah, if there might have been retrospective thought of, oh, he's 30 now, you remember when we saw that star? And hey Maud, we saw that really bright, and there might even be different reports of what they thought it was.
It's a possibility, of course. Unfortunately, we have, just only that few biblical passages to go with. And so, scholars and astronomers, can only work with those. Whether or not then later they decided, well, we need a miraculous event. This is just, what scholars can come up with. But there could be many other reasons.
Astronomers of the time kept quite detailed records, though, right? So that they would have maybe looked back through their own records.
Not the Hebrews. They did not keep records of astronomical events.
Oh, really? Okay.
Right. No, only most of these records of planetary movements all come from the Chaldean cuneiform tablets. And they keep very good ones. I mean, Venus was their most important goddess, and their movements of Venus were routinely written in the tablets. And we can actually date things in Babylonian times more accurately because of those tablets and the sightings and of astronomical events recorded in the cuneiform tablets. The only thing we have is around Christ's birth is Josephus and the Bible. There might be one or two other, I think, scholar, right, Tom? Back in that time.
Yeah, it's pretty sparse.
Yeah.
It's pretty sparse. Honestly, it's really Josephus is the closest thing to a truly contemporary historian. I mean, even the Gospels are written, 40 plus years after the adult life of Jesus. So really Josephus is about the closest we get to a contemporary account.
Yeah.
Mhm. All right. Any other thoughts?
Maurice, we're 800 miles north of you. Does that affect what we're going to see?
Good question.
Pardon?
We're 800 miles north of you.
Uh-huh.
Does that affect what we're going to see on the 21st?
No, because Jupiter and Saturn are so far away. They are actually on the other side of the solar system right now. And by January, they would have gone behind the sun. And so they're so far away that everywhere on the earth, you will see this same event. Lots of times the moon passes in front of a star. And then because the moon is so much closer, depending on where you are on the earth, the star can pass above the moon as the moon passes by it, or it can go behind it, or it can be below it because of parallax, we call it. And so with things closer to us, they could be different, but no, they're so far apart. Everywhere on the earth, they'll look the same. Astronomers are looking forward to this because you'll be able to see both planets in the same field of view of a telescope, which is so rare. And I'm hoping to be able to photograph them together in the sky through my telescope with just one shot, not two shots and do Photoshop.
So what's the significance of this occurring at the solstice? I mean, is that just happenstance, or is there
Just
some?
happenstance. It just happenstance.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It is. And of course, it hasn't happened this close. Jupiter passes Saturn about once every 20 years because Jupiter goes around the sun in 12 and Saturn goes around in 29. And so Jupiter has to catch up. So that's why it takes 8 more years. It doesn't pass it every 12. Saturn has moved on by, so it has to catch up. But most of the times they're further apart. This is so rare to be that you can't separate them with the naked eye, and it hasn't happened in 400 years. That's how rare this is. And I am praying for clear skies at night.
Yeah.
I know. Let me say to everyone, if you obviously if you have a telescope, that'd be a wonderful thing to have for.
Yeah, even a small scope.
But even if you're, if you give up on the idea of, clearly seeing great images of the planets, there are apps that you can download on your smartphone from the Google App Store or the Apple Store that are like Skywatch apps, where you turn it on and then you point your phone up to the sky.
Should have mentioned that.
Move around and it tells you what you're seeing.
Yes, wonderful.
The stars are and the planets.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's a wonderful kind of thing, and they're easy to find, and most of them.
They're free.
Most of them are free. Yeah. Although they do offer like premium.
Yes, they do.
Too, that are.
If you have binoculars, use binoculars to separate the two. Since you won't be able to separate them with your naked eye, use binoculars and you'll see them as two objects. Mm-hmm. May not be like, you won't be able to see the rings in binoculars, but you'll see they're two little stars separated. Whereas with the naked eye, you won't see two.
Mm-hmm.
I think the church might be a good spot to go look from the parking lot, looking towards the west.
Yeah.
But I haven't checked that out, but I think it might be.
Mm-hmm. Maurice, one thing that I personally really appreciate about your presentation tonight is the opportunity to bring faith and science together in such a way that science can become an occasion for spiritual experience, or for spiritual epiphanies even. When I was a kid, I know my parents are on this Zoom meeting also, and so they will recognize this. There was a time when I was a very young child coming out of a Christmas Eve worship service at our Presbyterian church. And I remember looking up, and I had no idea what I was looking at, but I looked up in the sky and I looked for the brightest star in the sky. I looked at it, I said, I wonder if that's the star that the wise men followed. And of course, no, of course not. But the point is whether I was right or not, the point is that it became an occasion for experiencing a sense of wonder associated with Christ. And so now we all have something to look out for, something to watch for. And we look up in the sky and it will become for us a sacramental event, really, an event that mediates for us spiritual truth, spiritual reality. And that's a great gift. And I personally appreciate it very much.
And 3 days later, when we have hopefully the Christmas Eve drive-in, the two will still be out there very close together.
Mm-hmm. And if Lord willing, the clear skies and all that, and you're there and I'm there, you can help people find it.
Yes. Oh, you won't be able to miss it. Jupiter is so bright. It's the brightest star in the west now.
Okay.
It's very bright.
All right.
All righty. Well, thank you all for attending.
Yes, Maurice, thank you so very much. Don't go away yet, everybody. Don't go away yet. I just want to make a quick two quick announcements. But yes, Maurice, thank you so very much for this presentation. It's been so interesting, and it is indeed something for us to be looking forward to on December the 21st. I do want to remind everyone that video of this presentation will be available on the church's YouTube page, which is accessible from the church website, which is gotofriendship.org. Gotofriendship.org. Scroll down near the bottom, and you'll see a YouTube logo. It says "Find us on YouTube" or something like that, and click on that, and it'll take you there. Video should be up probably by about 10 o'clock tonight. Also, if you have enjoyed this presentation and you would like to be informed of future Forum at Friendship presentations, which I can't promise will be as interesting as this one tonight, but if you would like to be on a mailing list to receive word of future programs, just let me know that by sending me an email at pastortom@gotofriendship.org. pastortom@gotofriendship.org. If you originally heard of this presentation tonight from me, if you heard about it from me, you are already on the mailing list. Okay. So, but if you didn't and you'd like to be informed of others in the future, just shoot me an email and let me know. All right. Well, with that, I bid you all a good night and a very, very Merry Christmas.
And thank you all, my friends, for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maurice. Thank you. And thank you, Tom. Very good. Excellent.
Thank you, Maurice.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad you enjoyed it.
Thanks, Maurice.
Thanks, Patsy. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Maurice.
Thank you. All right.
He said it'll be up at 10.
Good job, Maurice.
Thanks.